Hey guys, this is Katie Dozier and Colin Moshman for CardsChat.com, and today we're going to be continuing on with our course, Become a Winning Poker Player in 30 Days.
Yes, and the topic of day 27 is check raising. So Katie, I want to ask you, what do you think of the idea that check raising is an ungentlemanly play?
I think that then you should call me ungentlemanly, because check raising is probably my favorite play to make in poker.
So then you're not a gentleman.
I think we established that back when I had our first child.
All right, that's fair enough. So let me ask you then, why do you like check raising?
All right, first of all, it makes you unpredictable and difficult to play against, and that is really important in poker. If you are easy to play against, then you're probably not making the most money you could. You want to be obnoxious to play against, not necessarily in terms of table talk or demeanor, but in terms of the actual plays you're making being difficult and unpredictable for other people to play against.
Exactly. So an example of a very predictable player would be one who, let's say he calls pre-flop in the big blind, and then when he has a big hand, he bets right out. When he's weak, he checks and he gives up a lot. And that's going to be very easy for us to play well against, whereas somebody who is checking most hands, and some of the time he'll put out a big check raise or a check call with strong and weak hands, is going to be a lot more unpredictable.
And a lot cooler. Don't
Yes.
they sound like sort of mysterious?
Yeah, maybe he's wearing a hoodie, a backwards cap.
Maybe she's wearing a backwards cap.
That's a good point. That's a good point. She's the one who check raises, absolutely. So key factors. Number one, I think this is important, which is that we're mainly going to be doing this on coordinated flops or birds for the reason that it's going to have a lot more purpose in that we can do it with draws as well, which is impossible on a dry flop. And also that if we have a strong hand, we accomplish protecting our hand.
Yeah, there are so many reasons to do it when the board is coordinated and wet that just aren't there when it's a drier flop. And it's more fun. It's more of a punchline, too, when you do it on some super coordinated board. You know, it's scarier.
Absolutely. And in keeping with the theme of unpredictability, we're doing this with our made hands as well as draws that don't have much showdown value but benefit tremendously from getting our opponent to fold. And then the last one there is you want your opponent to likely bet if you check. So the main thing there is that they have the pre-flop betting lead or they're a maniac.
Yeah, well, you can't check raise if no bet happens. That's the downside to the plan of check raising, so you definitely want to have confidence that they're likely to bet so that you have the opportunity to go ahead and check raise.
Is that kind of like if the tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, has it actually made a sound? Have we just uncovered a massive paradox?
I don't know. I never figured out that tree one. You know, I'm still working on that, so.
All right, that's going to be the next slide, actually.
Day 31. No.
Day 31, sound waves. Now, we don't talk about this in the book, but it's actually a pretty cool spot, which I think is pretty awesome. So we've got some kind of draw, and we check. Now, if our opponent checks back, then that's great because we get a free card with the draw. But if our opponent bets, then we can check raise, so we don't care what he does.
Right. Either way, we make the most of it, I guess you could say. And it's doubly cool in that spot because they're not expecting it, even more so.
Absolutely, yeah. So you don't need to know whether you think your opponent's going to bet. And then we also quote the Mowgli's, pretty awesome band, if I might say.
Yeah, they are. And you've been hitting the Mowgli's pretty hard, so I'm not surprised they're showing up in this video.
Yeah, Great Divide, San Francisco, pretty awesome songs. Now, really, really important, okay? So check raising is aggressive, it's unpredictable, but obviously there are times not to do it. And one of them is if you have reasonable showdown value. So a lot of the time you're just going to want to play a more passive line. And that can apply if you have a made hand like second pair. Maybe you have like a gut shot straight draw and bottom pair, so you have plenty of showdown value. And you just check call instead.
Right. It's really important to acknowledge that having a check raising plan is going to in general mean you're playing a much larger pot. So if it's a situation where you want to be playing a smaller pot, those are times where you're sadly going to be less likely to check raise.
Yes, and generally also on dry flops, dry birds, mainly going to be check calling when we continue on out of position without the betting lead. Now, this is not a happy topic, but some of the time, you know what? You just have to check and fold.
Why do we even have to talk about folding in this course? I'm confused.
Well, yeah, you know what? We should eliminate that. We should do a global find and replace and eliminate the word fold.
I feel like on this slide, instead of the beautiful little cards chat spade, we should have just done a frowny face.
Yes. Yes.
No, seriously though, of course, it is very important, sadly. But it's part of what makes when you do have the right opportunity to check raise so much more fun. You do not want to overdo the check raise. It's something that you want to make sure you're staying on top of because it's so much fun that, at least in my experience, I've gone through phases where I've been like, all right, I'm definitely check raising too much. I got to put on the brakes more.
Yeah, definitely. You do not want to play against Katie in a home game in particular. She check raise you constantly. But key thing here is that we're usually going to have either some kind of decent made hand or some kind of draw, but pretty rare that you're going to make this play as a total bluff. And on that topic, why don't we move on to some specific hand examples and put this concept into action?
All right, so I see you picked the right one of the two of us to check out some check raising hands.
Yes. You know what? I didn't have a single check raise in my entire history of online hands.
Of 30 million hands.
Yes. This is kind of embarrassing. Let's go to Katie's. And here we are. So I really like this check raise. We allow this player who looks like a maniac to bet. And you know what? You just lay down the hammer.
I don't know that we can really say this player looks like a maniac, given that we have 3 hands with him. It seems like your standards for that may be slightly low. I like a few more hands. But
6. You like 6 hands.
No, we're like 20 at least. Anyway, I think, though, that the other reason that I can expect them to bet, or that this is a great opportunity to go for a check raise, is the fact that they did raise an early position. So, you know, you can see it as their maniac. I can see it as, well, they didn't raise, actually. They limped.
Enter the pot. Fair enough.
They entered the pot.
Fair enough.
But they entered the pot from early position, which I think makes it a lot more likely that they do end up betting on the flop when checked too.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that's really important here is that if this were a flop containing 2 nines that was a dry flop, we're usually going to check call to allow this player to continue bluffing. So if it's like 9-9 deuce rainbow, I assume, Katie, you're just going to check call here.
Yeah, that would definitely be my plan. And also here, I think I sized this slightly on the large side, just because it's really not going to be too hard to play for stacks if this guy is up for it. I think I could have gone more like 300. Not that 400's a big mistake, but...
Yeah, absolutely. If anything, slightly smaller. But this is still a great check raise, and so many worse hands you can continue on with, including straight draws, flush draws, Queen X hands, even just random stuff. If he is a maniac, we don't know. Fair enough. And maybe he has some kind of hand like King 6 of Hearts. Well, probably not that one since we have the King of Hearts.
I would be a little concerned.
Ace 6 of Hearts. So ace high and a backdoor flush draw. So lots you can continue on with. And jam the turn. And get max value against the straight draw. So very well played.
Yeah, that one worked out definitely pretty well for me.
Now, on the topic of maniacs, Katie, you have some explaining to do. 18 hands, you're playing 88-71 with 100%
now,
3-bet.
See, I'm glad this is coming up in this video because I think that this really shows how ridiculous a sample. I wish I could say I was playing 88-71. Probably shouldn't be doing a course on how to win at poker if those were my actual stats, but I'm obviously playing nowhere near that. I love that I have 100% 3-bet also.
Yeah, that's incredible. What I actually think is going on here is that some of the time when you replay a select number of hands, it's pulling up stats from them when you combine across games.
You destroyed it. Now, I was so cool. That was my moment of cool laughness, gone forever.
Oh, no. So, you know what? Let me be honest. I wouldn't mind seeing a 4-bet here with the dead money. What do you think about that?
I think that it's a fairly close scenario here. I don't mind playing out of position versus the big blind in particular, and then in this
You mean, okay, so this guy, the 3-better is the one who has position, but the big blind does look like he's probably a recreational player.
Yeah, sorry,
he's
that's
playing
what I'm
passively
trying to
so
say.
far. We're going to have position on him, so that's fair.
Yeah, okay, well, good. Thank you for saving what I was saying.
I liked what you were saying. Now, with the ace-queen, the guy who 3-bet us does have the pre-flop lead. Even though it was a very small 3-bet, he's got the betting lead, so for that reason, we expect he's going to bet, and you check to him. Well done.
What if I check fold? Would that be also... good as what I was saying earlier.
No, we would end the video.
We would have to redo it
Immediately.
at that point. Yeah, I think that this is a great spot, again, to go ahead and fire that check raise. And at this point, the pot is 750. And so I like just going ahead and shoving, of course, with the effective stack not even being ours.
Yeah, exactly. So great risk-reward ratio here. And also, this is such a coordinated flop. These guys can pay off with a lot of worse hands. It's fine if people fold a strong draw in a large pot. And the big blind also, after putting in so much of his stack toward the pot, he's probably not going to fold all that much.
Yeah, one would think. And he does get it in.
What do you think he has here, Katie? You know what I think he has?
What?
I think he has...
I think he has an ace. Even though there are only 2 left in the deck.
I think that he has pocket 7s.
That is a very specific...
Because that's a lucky hand in many cultures.
That's a very unusual guess. Well, it would have made it... the old gut shot there.
You know what? Props to the Ubaks. He did not want to fold his gut shot.
And
he saw it through.
He called that down.
He did.
You know?
So, excellent check raise there. I think here we could either 3-bet or just call. With like 10s plus, you definitely want to 3-bet. I like your call to send mine here.
In the small blind, this is like the top of my set mining range, I would say, pocket 8s. But I think 3-betting would definitely be reasonable.
Yeah. Now here what's really interesting is that the initial raiser is the Makambam player, and he just calls the 20, which looks super weak. If he had an overpair, he's almost definitely going to raise the 20, so it's very rare that he's going to have pocket 8 speed at this point of the hand. So if we just call, we're basically giving them a free card. Our 8s is almost definitely the best hand, so I would put out a check raise right here for value and to charge worse hands.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Bam!
And I think
Bam!
I'm the one who did it in game.
But I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited.
I think Makabam also a lot of times has overs to this board, and we want to make sure to really be charging that.
Absolutely. So if he has, let's say, for example, that he has the ace of clubs. Okay, so in that case, he's got 4 outs to a gut shot. He's got 3 outs to an overpair, another out or so for backdoor flush. So right there, he has almost like 32% equity against us, and that doesn't even account for the other player.
Right. So this is another spot that check raise I think is really important based on the bet sizing in part.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. Because let's say, for example, here that primary checks and the initial raiser bets 120. I would probably just check call there. We don't really want to get it in.
Right, I definitely agree, because then over pairs to ours are well within his range if he does that, whereas just calling, he really doesn't have over pairs in his range, conceivably.
Yes, yes. And one of the things also this goes to show is that all these lessons intertwine. So, for example, this one, logic and hand reading comes into play. What do we make of Makambam raising pre-flop and then just calling the 20? Answer, that he's very rarely strong on this flop.
Right.
All right, so...
If there was ever a hand where check raises happen the most, I would say it's Queen Jack suited, wouldn't you? You're most likely to
I
check
never
raise
knew that.
with
Is that true?
I think Queen Jack suited just really lends itself to that check raise, you know, because it hits so many coordinated boards.
That's a good point. That's probably going to be a new quotable statistic, Queen Jack suited. Katie, what are your thoughts here? Should we just call? Are we raising? What's our plan here?
Our plan is to follow through on my 100% check raise percent, which you guys are all so impressed with. Now I think this is a great one to go ahead again and check raise coordinate. We have so many outs here. It's basically as close as you can get to really hitting the board without having really hit it yet.
Yeah, definitely. So here we have the 9 flush outs. We have 3 more to the gut shot. So 12 out draw. And that doesn't even include partial outs to over pairs.
Right.
So great spot to check raise. Now, anytime you check raise like this, you need to have a plan. We're still planning our hands. Katie, what is your plan here when you check raise?
My plan is I very much want to get it in, and I think my hand is so strong that this isn't even a spot where I necessarily want to maximize fold equity, because I like the equity I have in this spot so much in terms of check raising to 420. I like doing the 420 raise sizing 2 in general when 420 works for that naturally, because I do think that people think of it as being more bluffy. Maybe that's not true, and maybe you need to balance that somewhat, but still.
Okay, but that's pretty massively DJing that you actually want the action here with the draw. I love that.
Now,
I have to say, I love that.
Versus this player, 20, and he looks very, very passive. I think that I would get it in a lot of times with hands that I have more equity against.
Fair enough. Now, one thing also, of course, so you, of course, are going to call it off facing a 3-bet shove, and that if this guy calls, you're probably going to shove most turn cards.
Yeah. And that brings up an important point with check raising. Your plan and having that plan for the hand is even more important than in a non-check raise situation, because by definition of making that check raise, you're increasing the size of the pot. You therefore have to have a plan that's even more perhaps solid than, when you're in a check call, couple bet scenario.
Yes, definitely. So, Katie, this looks to me, if I'm correct, like a 3 rebuy 180-man final table. And you min raise, so a little bit of an unconventional play. Why do you make this play?
Well, this is definitely not my default to min raise in this scenario. This is me playing my opponent and feeling that I'm not as likely to get action from him, either in terms of him flatting or in terms of him 3-bet shoving, as I would a bunch of other players. I mean, I would never do this into a reg in this scenario.
Right. So usually we're going to be limping here, maybe occasionally jamming. But the thing here is he's got 19 and 7 stats. He looks pretty passive. So that read and that logic makes complete sense. He does, in fact, call. And this is a good spot for what I think we're going to officially call the Mowgli's play.
The Mowgli's play. All right. They've needed a play. Everybody's been wondering when it would happen. Right now is the answer.
Yes, exactly. So in other words, if we check, which you do, well done.
I checked.
Well
yes.
done. There's no reason to think the big blind is going to bet because the fact that he's kind of passive and also we're the ones who have the betting lead, but we don't really care what he does. In fact, more than that, we're happy with either option. If he checks back, that's great. We have an open and a straight draw. We can hit top pair with the king.
We have showdown value.
We have showdown value.
I think we have a lot of showdown value.
Absolutely.
King high in this part.
So we're happy for him to check back. If he bets, then I don't know. We'll see what happens because you know what? That's what he's done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and what did I do?
Bam!
Bam! The check raise happened.
So when he bets, now we have a very good risk-reward ratio. The problem here is that if we bet, then we can't just shove 220,000 to 69,000. Bad risk-reward ratio.
Stack sizes are not good for that, right?
Yeah, but now stack sizes are good. Then we can just lay down the hammer and win a large pot without a fight.
Yeah, that one worked out pretty sweet.
And now we get to the big quiz question of the day.
Oh, look at what we have. What a surprise.
Okay.
Queen Jack suited.
This is too much. This is too much.
Queen Jack suited.
So the question here is, can you match the wits of Katie Dozier?
Let's see if I can, because I'm pregnant and I have pregnant brains, so I probably can't.
Okay. So this is going to be a 2-part quiz question. All right, so part 1, is this a good spot to check raise? And if so, what sizing should we do? Should we raise to 375? Should we jam? Which sizing is best here?
Should we check fold?
Should we check fold? So go ahead and pause the video and come up with your answer to that question. And the correct answer is yes, this is definitely a good spot to check raise because of the fact that we have a strong draw with our open and straight draw, backdoor flush draw, and double over cards. And at the same time, we don't have a lot of showdown value right now, and there's a great risk-reward ratio on shoving. So that's the answer to the second part. The pot is 625. It's something close to half our stack. So definitely the correct play here is going to be to check shove.
Yes, I agree. And as a further note to this hand, the player that is c-betting here is a reg that this is a different, database we're looking at with the number of hands, but I have a tremendous number of hands with this player, like probably over 25,000. And at some point, I deduced that this player actually had a higher than normal c-bet percent. And so that's something that you can look to take advantage of with more check raises too.
Yeah, wow, that's a great point. Yes. And you do take advantage of that.
Come on, call me. I'm going to hit. I feel it. I feel it.
Do you always want action with these draws?
Always with check raise, because it's the biggest punchline when you end up winning. And with Queen Jack suited, I mean, you literally always want action, right?
Always. And in this case, you know what? This is pretty great. This reg you were talking about, you and Neo New chop up his pre-flop raise and his c-bet. Well done.
Yeah, and I want to point out that I did have the backdoor flush draw, which he did not.
No, he did. He used a jack of diamonds.
Oh.
Which is pretty funny. That doesn't happen very often. You guys are both kind of free-rolling the other person.
That's true. That's true. But I'll take it. I'll take it.
So that's it. Now, tomorrow we're going to pick up with a very fun topic. It'll be day 28 on exploiting risk aversion. So thanks a lot for watching. This has been Colin Moshman and Katie Dozier for the CardsChat.com course, Become a Winning Poker Player in 30 Days.